their print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Elizabeth Ortel, and for the next hour I'll be reading from issues of the Batavia Daily News, including the issue of Wednesday, June 3rd, on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. In the first article from the front page, End of an Era, Max Pies calls it a day. Business stalwart set to close after 121 years in Batavia, by Mike Patinella for the Daily News. Always quick with a joke, Phil Pies had one ready when he was asked what he and his son Steve were going to do now that they have decided to close their legendary furniture and carpet store business that began in 1905 at 400 South Jackson Street. I'm old, but look pretty good for 121. And Steve, he wants to be a lifeguard in a car wash, said Phil, who's actually a youthful 83 years old and in his 56th year at the original Max Pies store opened by his grandfather Max at the outset of the 20th century. Jokes aside, Phil said the time has come to close the curtain on a long and successful career. Max Pies Furniture is entering a 3-month liquidation sale period to be coordinated by a third party. After that, the Pies plan to sell the building. When asked why now, Phil said, there are a lot more stores out there now, more competition, but really the main reason is I want to start enjoying life now. He said that Steve, 56, plans to continue working at WBTA Radio while exploring other options. As the business expanded beyond the Jackson Street location, Max was joined by his sons, Sam, Phil's dad, and Jake. The company grew to include 5 stores throughout Western New York, some of them selling furniture and carpet and some offering carpet only. At its peak, the business employed about 20 people. Today, 4 others assisted Phil and Steve in various capacities. Jimmy Sanders, who has worked there for 40 years, Peggy Cancelme, 23 years, Eddie Miller, and Reggie Hale. We'd like to thank all those in our community and the surrounding communities who have supported us over all these years, and hopefully we serviced them and made them happy, Phil said. He added that he and Marlene Blaustein, his significant other, hope to travel. It would be great to see some of our nation's sights. Max Pies Furniture made headlines over the years. The Genesee County Chamber of Commerce celebrated the completion of a new facade at the store in 2021 with a ribbon cutting. And the Chamber of Commerce recognized Max Pies in 2023 as its Business of the Year. Phil and Steve were frequent contributors to local charities, highlighted by sales of Phil's the Furniture Man official bobblehead that raised more than $2,500 for Crossroads House in 2024. In October 2024, Assemblyman Steve Howley honored Max Pies Furniture, along with Chapin Manufacturing, for designation on the New York Historic Business Preservation Registry. Both Chapin International and Max Pies Furniture have built a legacy of hard work, integrity, and service to the people of Batavia and the greater part of Western New York. Their presence has been a pillar in Batavia, and I am honored to celebrate their achievements, Howley, Republican, Batavia, said at the time. Contacted on Tuesday afternoon, Howley said that any time a business closes its doors, it's a blow to the business, the employees, and in this case, the community at large. It's a lot of years of service, 4 generations, he said. It's a pretty sad day. We've all come to love and purchase from the Pies family. After Phil's sense of humor was mentioned, Howley brought up the television commercials where Phil was cast as the Furniture Man, who bounced off sofas, beds, and chairs in a frenzied state while touting another big sale. One day we were in Tops getting some food, and Phil was there, Holly said. And my youngest son, Cooper, who was 7 or 8 at the time, he's in his 30s now, said, "My God, Dad, it's the furniture man. Can we meet him? Can we meet him?" He was jumping up and down to meet him. Another article from the front page. Angel R. Cologne, again denied parole. Murder is regarded as among the worst Wyoming County. By Matt Sertel. Dannemora, notorious child killer Angel R. Cologne will remain in prison. Cologne, 52, is serving a 25-year-to-life sentence for the 1997 rape and murder of Samantha Nicole Zaldivar, who had turned 7 years old just 2 weeks before. Cologne's latest parole hearing took place May 19th. He was previously denied parole in 2022 and 2024. He remains in custody at Clinton Correctional Facility, the maximum security prison in Dannemora, Clinton County, according to the State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision website. Cologne's next parole hearing will take place in May 2028. Samantha's murder is widely regarded among the worst in Wyoming County history. Cologne sexually assaulted Samantha and smothered her to death at her mother's trailer home in Hermitage. He buried her in a shallow grave in a cornfield about 1,000 yards from the residence. Samantha's mother, Rachel Straw, reported her missing shortly afterward, touching off a massive search that lasted nearly 3 months. Samantha's body was found May 23rd of that year, and Cologne was arrested and charged with capital murder. Straw was charged with hindering prosecution to lying to protect Cologne, though both she and Cologne denied that she knew what happened to her daughter. Cologne ultimately pleaded guilty to second-degree murder to avoid facing the death penalty. A victim advocate who helped organize opposition to Cologne's latest parole bid said family advocates and Samantha's former classmates are thrilled with Tuesday's news of the denial. Parole hearing transcripts demonstrate that Angel Cologne continues to minimize his direct role in Samantha's violent sexual assault and suffocation, said Ashley, whose last name is being withheld. Additionally, he continues to deny any sexual attraction to children and changes his narrative every 2 years when held to account by the authorities familiar with the evidence in this case. Samantha's family remains thankful to state parole officials for their thorough examination and continued commitment to ensuring he remains behind bars, Ashley said. The most important part to keep the community engaged in opposing his parole is the reminder that his plea deal does not require him to be on the sex offender registry upon release. Cologne's charges originally included aggravated sexual abuse, which was dropped when he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Another article from the front page. Ecologist discusses data center wildlife by Ben Beagle. Batavia. Some wildlife species would likely be displaced from the immediate area of the proposed data center at the Western New York Science and Technology Advanced Manufacturing Park in the town of Alabama. But mitigation areas developed at the site and the nearby John White Wildlife Management Area would provide habitat for those species, according to environmental consultants who provided an update environmental reviews for the project to the Genesee County Economic Development Center's STAMP Committee on Tuesday. The meeting reviewed environmental and sound studies, which are both ongoing as GCEDC continues its State Environmental Quality Review, or SEQR, application of STREAM U.S. Data Center's proposed $19.46 billion 500 megawatt 2.2 million square foot data center at the 1,250-acre campus the agency owns in the town of Alabama. Katie Hoynacke, senior ecologist and assistant operations manager for CC Environment and Planning, is conducting an environmental study, told the committee that there will be localized impacts that are going to push species out of the area, but from a population standpoint, the impacts won't be seen as the species will find some habitat elsewhere in the surrounding areas. Wildlife displacement and mitigation measures were identified in the site's original environmental impact statement, completed when the site was being developed 2 decades ago. Sound impacts, which are part of a separate study, will be a factor in determining how the wildlife, in particular bird species, likely respond to the latest proposed project. Hoynacke and Sheila Hess, principal ecologist and CEO of CC Environment and Planning, said there are few studies specific to data centers and wildlife, studies of similar developments and commercial projects. There are some suites of species that are sensitive. These include grassland birds, some small mammals, some insects, and bats, Hoynacke said. Not that while the site does not host a lot of grassland bird, the short-eared owl and northern harrier, which are considered grassland birds, have been documented on the site and in the vicinity. As a result, we will re-evaluate the new sound memo as it comes out, and we'll update our memo to see if there's any impacts. The consultants will also take a closer look at the sound study to examine potential effects on bat populations. Based on the current noise study, the noise impacts are expected to be very localized, Hoynacke said. The goal is for noise levels to be within 60 decibels during the day at the project's property lines. At 40 to 45 decibels, there can begin to be impacts to species, Hoynacke said, especially those that rely on hearing, such as grassland birds that need to hear each other singing, or some of the raptors, hawks, and owls that hunt using sound. As a result, the consultants said they will look again when the noise study comes out, but that sound isn't going to carry very far, so the impacts will be limited. In response, GCEDC President and CEO Mark Massey asked, "It sounds like that as long as those sound impacts are contained within the property boundary of the proposed data center, that our mitigation fields and the John White area would not be impacted. That grassland birds at that point of the mitigation area would not be impacted by this project." Is that accurate? Hoynacke agreed. From the initial version of the sound study, and from what I'm hearing, it's going to be even less than the noise impacts. Hess said that by the time the sound reaches those grassland areas, it's already below levels that will not impact the species. We'll confirm that when we see the study, she said. GCEDC board member Craig Juncker asked Hess, who has been involved with the development of the stamp site for several years, if there was anything about the project in particular that concerned her with what she's seen over the years in terms of complying and mitigating impacts. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Batavia Daily News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. One of the things that we've always done is looked at ways to create a site that further minimizes the impact of development, Hess said. I don't see a difference necessarily between a data center or advanced manufacturing. Whatever is going to be in there is going to displace wildlife. What I'm trying to say is that we've always looked at the site holistically in terms of, can we maintain some of the higher quality wetlands on the site? Can we maintain corridors that will allow continued mobility and movement of wildlife species, even around as you develop? That's one of the best things you can do when you're doing a large-scale development site like STAMP, is to maintain and create that kind of continued connectivity, which is a lot of the concerns for wildlife. Sam East, acoustic specialist with GHD, the company reviewing the acoustic report for the proposed data center, provided the committee with a detailed overview of what is being reviewed and how frequently it is being reviewed. He described the process as the hard look required by the SEQR application. We've really been looking at and pressing ramble and stream on all the various noise aspects of this proposed development, he said. Ramble is a consultant retained by Stream. GHD's review has included generator noise, transformer noise, chiller noise, low noise impacts, tonality impacts. The review has been through various revisions of reporting and acoustic modeling with Ramble, East said. We've been reviewing it in turn each time a revision is submitted, the new report and the new model, and making comments, making recommendations, making request changes, and slowly but surely working toward a robust technical report that demonstrates compliances with the required criteria. The report has reviewed things such as ground absorption, reflectivity of building surfaces, and ground surfaces, including whether surfaces are grass or asphalt, and the site's specific topography, including the length of the land and the elevation data, directions, and whether a single-story or three-story house. As he said, a number of public comments have related to noise. All the public hearing and written comments have been provided to GHD so that GHD has those and can swing those back and ramble and stream. Another article from the Daily News on the second page. What's in the New York State budget? By Alex Galt. The state budget is finished and signed into law, and among the hundreds of pages of legislative language and billions of dollars in taxation and spending is a significant amount of non-budget related policy changes to things like environmental goals, construction reviews, and auto insurance. The final plan spends $268.5 billion, the largest in state history, as most annual budgets tend to be in New York. That's $113 billion more than the 2016-2017 state budget 10 years ago. Within the 10 bills that make up the state budget, many of the issues that Governor Kathleen C. Hochul has pushed for this year have been addressed. The governor has some of her most significant leverage in budget talks, and as a result, uses those negotiations and the legislation itself to push key issues that may not advance through the typical legislative process led by the Senate and Assembly. Climate Act. One of the most controversial issues Hochul pushed for this year was a plan to change some aspects of the state's Keystone Climate Law, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, or Climate Act. Hochul did not outline her plan for specific changes to the law until March 20th, well after submitting her executive budget proposal. and just 10 days before the April 1st budget deadline. Actual legislative language specifying what Hochul wanted to change in the law was not shared until the budget bill containing it was printed on Tuesday. Hochul won a number of changes to the Climate Act that will delay the requirement that the state implement regulations to meet the Act's goals to the end of 2028. The original bill had a 2024 deadline, and a court ruled that the state was in violation of the law by not putting regulations in place. State regulators have drafted a plan for a carbon tax program that will reinvest its revenues into green and carbon-neutral infrastructure. But Hochul argues, citing a report from the State Energy Research Authority, NYSERDA, NYSERDA, that a carbon tax program would drive energy costs up by thousands of dollars for New Yorkers, with upstate two-car homes likely to bear upward of $4,000 in additional costs. The carbon tax was not specifically called for in the original Climate Act, but rather identified by regulators as one of the more reasonable methods to achieve the Act's requirements. The changes made in the budget this year now name it as cap and invest, while not specifically requiring it come into effect. The tweaked Climate Act also now includes a legislative workaround that promotes a 60% reduction in emissions from 1990 levels by 2040, while leaving in place the existing 40% cut by 2030 language as a goal rather than a mandate. The long-term goal of cutting emissions by 85% by 2050 is still in place, and the new legislation also changes the accounting timelines for the effects of greenhouse gases, pushing New York to use a more common 100-year time frame rather than the 20-year standard set in the original Climate Act. These changes to the Climate Act are extremely unpopular among environmentalists and progressives in the state legislature. Protesters repeatedly marched through the state capitol, blocked entrance to the legislative chambers and the governor's office, as well as streets outside the Capitol, to protest any efforts to rewrite the law. Discussions over changes to the law dominated much of the budget negotiations among legislative leaders and the governor. Auto insurance. Another hard-fought issue that Hochul pushed through the budget this year was a list of changes to auto insurance and liability laws aimed at lowering the cost of car insurance in the state. Hochul's original list of changes wasn't fully put in place by the budget legislation, and the legislature put in a number of adjustments. Key changes include a ban on redlining, or using customer data like zip code or home ownership status to set the price of coverage, a change to state law that will require insurers get approval for any rate hikes, ending the current system that let companies hike rates by 5% annually without a regulatory review. A plan that came from Hochul to redefine what constitutes serious injury in state law, restricting it to lower payouts to accident victims, also made it through. The new laws also block anyone found to be more than 50% responsible for an accident from getting an insurance payout. Other changes include a cap on pain and suffering payouts to $100,000 if they were committing a crime at the time of the accident, and a series of changes meant to give law enforcement personnel more resources to investigate and prosecute attempted insurance fraud. Pensions. The budget also makes changes to Tier 6 of the state's employee pension program, which covers most state employees hired after 2012. The tier includes higher contribution requirements, lower overtime caps, and later retirement ages for employees covered by it. It was introduced in an effort to sustain the state's pension fund as older state employees with more generous plans retire. Public employee unions have complained for more than a decade about the plan and have pushed for changes. This year, some of these changes finally came to pass. This includes a slight cut to the contribution requirements from a range of 3% to 6% of annual paydown to a range of 3% to 5.75%. For teachers, the retirement age has been cut to 58, provided the teacher has worked for 30 years. Unions were asking for a blanket retirement age cut to 55 for all employees on Tier 6. And state employees also got a bump to the amount of annual overtime they can count toward their salary for pension purposes, up to $30,000 for most employees, and up to 25% of wages for state police and professional firefighters. The total cost of the changes is $577 million per year, with local governments expected to pick up the bulk of the extra costs. Another pension change was made for correction officers, enacting the death gamble bill that will allow the family of officers who die in the line of duty after their retirement age to collect on their pension benefits. That will come with a $1.7 million annual cost, plus a one-time $25.6 million lump sum payment to retroactively award pensions to the families of older officers who died at work. Less controversial issues included in this year's budget are a new exemption for tipped income, no tax on tips, and a new 75% tax on nicotine pouch products like Zyn, Z-Y-N. The new tax will generate about $54 million, while the tipped income exemption will cost about $50 million per year. Immigration. Hochul sought only a few public safety-related issues in the state budget this year, the most significant being her push to limit the use of local law enforcement in immigration enforcement efforts. While Republicans and the Trump administration have portrayed her policy as a sanctuary state policy, Hochul has taken great efforts to combat that narrative. New York is not a sanctuary for criminals, she told reporters in Albany on Thursday after a budget bill signing ceremony. Hochul's Local Cops, Local Crimes plan will bar any state office or local government agency, including local sheriff's offices, from entering into or maintaining 287G agreements with federal immigration authorities. Those agreements can include allowing immigration agents to use local jails to hold immigration detainees or to check jail populations for immigrants, as well as basic information sharing agreements, and in some cases, full deputization of local police officers to carry out immigration enforcement. In St. Lawrence County, legislators approved a 287G agreement earlier this year, giving sheriff's deputies at the county jail the training and power to flag inmates wanted by federal immigration authorities. That agreement would have to end under state law as it stands now. Over a period of time ranging from 90 days to 6 months, depending on the agreements, The state will now require that local law enforcement agencies terminate formal or informal cooperation agreements with immigration officials and restrict their access to non-public areas of their facilities. But it doesn't fully block local police from working with federal agents. If an officer has a reasonable suspicion that someone in their custody has committed a crime, they can flag them to federal immigration authorities without penalty. That's gotten criticism from progressives in Albany, who have spent most of the last year pushing for a bill that would essentially sever all contact between state and local officials with federal immigration officials unless a judge signs a warrant for the specific information or individual being sought by authorities. The package passed in the budget does restrict state and local employees from cooperating with ICE in civil immigration enforcement actions. They can only share information in pursuit of a criminal, and mostly only with a signed warrant. Listening to a reading of articles and features from the Batavia Daily News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Hochul also pushed through a new ban on protests immediately outside a place of worship by defining a new misdemeanor for intentionally interfering with someone's efforts to access or exit a place of worship. The law defines a 50-foot bumper zone around worship buildings where protests could create a reasonable fear that worshipers are being threatened, and authorizes police to keep protesters out of those 50-foot zones. Education? New York's public schools got another record-setting year of state aid, although the final details of just how much they were getting didn't come until the day after budget votes were held across the state. Lawmakers are giving the schools $39 billion in total aid, plus the guaranteed 2% increase allotted to all districts. The formula for the main state aid package, foundation aid, was also updated to afford more money to districts with students learning English as a second language, and for students in foster care or who are homeless. Hochul pushed for the state to spur on universal pre-K programs across the state, mandating that all districts have full-day pre-K programs for 4-year-olds by the fall semester of 2028. In New York City, the state is encouraging a more wide-ranging program, giving funding for universal pre-K for kids as young as 2 to the city's public schools. Lawmakers also approved a delay to the mandate that schools buy all electric buses. Districts were meant to start buying only electric vehicles starting next year, but now have until 2032 to start the transition. Districts originally had until 2035 to fully transition their fleets, and now have until 2040. This comes after districts across New York have asked for more time and more state support for the expensive undertaking, and in some cases have argued that electric buses will not work for their needs. There are also a handful of New York City-specific issues addressed in the state budget. A new pilot program to crack down on habitual superspeeders in the city was given a green light, and some tweaks to state-mandated pension rules were allowed to give the city some breathing room in its budget. A new tax on luxury second homes in the city, valued at more than $5 million, or condos valued at more than $1 million, will be subject to a new surcharge on their property tax bills. The rate ranges from 0.8% up to 1.3%. For condos and co-ops, the city can charge a much higher rate of up to 6.5%. Lawmakers also knocked out one provision that Hochul had laid out in her original budget request, her proposal to amend the state constitution to allow the sale and redevelopment of Camp Gabriel's, the former prison in the Adirondack Park. Hochul's proposed amendment would have allowed the state to sell the property, which is currently restricted as forest preserve and constitutionally barred from being sold or redeveloped. Local officials have been asking for the redevelopment for years to repurpose what was once a significant employer in the area and to stop the uncontrolled deterioration of the existing structures on the site. Governor Hochul included the measure in her proposed executive budget, but after negotiations with the legislature, it did not make the final plan. Some local news from the Daily News. Capital Project continues in Leroy by Samuel Zerillo. Leroy Central School has regained traction in its $12.5 million capital project. A multi-purpose turf field, single-use restrooms, and new windows are among the improvements underway as construction continues after facing a series of delays. The $12.5 million capital project has been underway at the Walcott Street and Junior-Senior High School since 2023. Superintendent Merritt Holley updated parents and school staff on Monday in a message discussing the district's commitment to pushing through the slowdowns. Throughout this capital project, our perseverance has certainly been tested, Holley wrote. We believe it is important to ensure that the work completed reflects the vision our taxpayers supported and provides safe, functional, and inspiring spaces for learning and community engagement. Among other progress, the high school's newly installed single-use bathrooms opened officially for use on Monday. Safety concerns from cracking wall tiles had been among the delays in what has now been an 11-month effort. Throughout the construction, Holley says the district worked diligently with contractors to address the issue while avoiding potential legal disputes, and the long process has now come to an end. Our focus instead remained on ensuring that the final progress met the standards of workmanship, quality, and design originally approved and funded by our taxpayers, he wrote. This was not an easy task and required persistence, collaboration, and a commitment to doing what was right for our students and community. At the Walcott Street School location, the LAP building will be fitted with new windows and trim work. Light pole bases will be installed this week in the surrounding green spaces to provide better lighting for outdoor activities at a lower long-term cost. This enhancement will also allow our marching band to continue utilizing the green space for practices while eliminating the need to rent portable lighting each summer and fall, resulting in long-term savings for the district, Holley wrote. As for the multi-purpose turf stadium at Hartwood Park, Holley reports that construction is continuing to move forward, with concrete work coming this week, and fencing, bleachers, and the press box being added to in the near future. Despite the challenges posed by a difficult winter and an exceptionally wet spring, progress is being made, and we are benefiting from improved weather conditions as we move into June, Holley said. As of last November, the turf field's projected completion was estimated in time for the fall 2026 sports season. Holley told the Daily News that updates to this timeline would be available after a district project meeting next Friday. Although the delays in overall construction have been difficult for many, Holley thanked members of the district for their continued support. Thank you for your continued support, patience, and understanding throughout this process, he wrote. We recognize that construction projects can be disruptive and at times frustrating. However, the improvements being made will serve our students and community for many years to come. Holly encourages anybody with questions or concerns to contact the district. Mike Rapone case adjourned to August, Batavia. The forcible touching case involving Mike Rapone has been adjourned to August 4th. Rapone, 72, appeared Tuesday for a brief proceeding in town court. His attorney received discovery materials Monday. Rapone was charged April 21st with forcible touching and second-degree harassment after an alleged incident in March at Batavia Downs Gaming and Hotel. He is accused of touching the intimate parts of another person for no legitimate purpose and making unwanted physical contact. He has pleaded not guilty. Rapone resigned from his job at the venue and was placed on administrative leave March 17th at Notre Dame High School. From the opinion section of the Daily News, the FDA's about-face on flavored vapes will prove deadly for kids by Michael Bloomberg. The decline in youth smoking is one of the great public health achievements of the 21st century, celebrated by conservatives and liberals alike. Yet the White House is now in the process of endangering it. Unless it reverses course, millions of American children will suffer the consequences. Tobacco-related death and disease do not discriminate by party. Everyone knows someone who has been affected by the ravages of tobacco use, but thanks to smart policies that have dramatically cut smoking rates, those stories have become less common. 25 years ago, nearly 30% of U.S. high school students smoked cigarettes. By 2024, that number had fallen to 1.7%, an astoundingly large decline. Unfortunately, there's more to the story. Hiding in that progress is the rise of e-cigarettes, or vapes. About 8% of high school students use them regularly. Of those who do, 9 in 10 are using flavored e-cigarettes. Most have already tried and failed to quit. Those statistics are deeply troubling, since the list of potential harms from e-cigarettes is long. Lung damage and respiratory illnesses, heart disease, impairment to young people's brain development, and other health problems given the toxic mix of chemicals they contain. But the dangers don't stop there. Using e-cigarettes makes teens 3 to 4 times more likely to smoke traditional cigarettes, according to the Department of Health and Human Services. Tobacco industry executives know this, of course, and they know the best way to hook teens is with sweet and fruity flavors. In 2019, President Donald Trump promised to crack down on this problem with strong rules and regulations, and to his credit, he did. The Food and Drug Administration banned flavors other than menthol and tobacco in 2022, and it made an enormous difference, helping to dramatically cut high school vaping rates. But after the tobacco industry's backroom lobbying and political donations, the FDA recently reversed course on flavored products without even conducting a scientific review. The industry claims that only those ages 21 and older can legally buy any tobacco product, but that's laughable given how easy it is for children to get around restrictions. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Batavia Daily News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. In fairness, the industry does make one valid point. The administration has failed to stop the flow of flavored vapes from China and other countries that are sold illegally here. Yet the way to deal with that problem, as with the smuggling of fentanyl, isn't to legalize their production and sale. It's to get tougher and smarter in cracking down on them. Instead, the government is doing the opposite, giving up. The FDA will now effectively stop policing the black market, allowing unregulated products full of toxins to poison children. And it will also start allowing e-cigarette companies to sell their products before the agency has undertaken scientific reviews of them, further increasing the likelihood that Americans will consume dangerous levels of hazardous chemicals. These moves threaten to undermine 25 years of progress on smoking, much of it spurred by actions our administration took in New York City that spread across the country and the world. We dramatically reduced smoking rates through a variety of strategies, including higher taxes, enforcement against the black market, support for secession, and an indoor smoking ban. Back then, tobacco companies argued that the smoking ban would destroy the city's hospitality industry. Instead, it boomed. Bar and restaurant owners who initially opposed the ban quickly came to love it because it attracted more customers who spent more money. Today, the tobacco industry is making even more spurious arguments, including claiming that it's in the business of helping people quit smoking. If you believe that, then I have a bridge to sell you. It's true that there is some evidence e-cigarettes can help smokers quit, but it's not sweet and fruity flavors the smokers crave. It's nicotine. And the best way to reduce nicotine addiction is through prevention, which requires banning flavored vapes to keep kids from picking up the habit. Parents have long warned their children against accepting candy from strangers to keep them safe from predators. Tobacco companies offering flavored vapes is the new version of that old lesson. And disgracefully, government is getting in bed with the predators. The good news is, the American people don't need to wait for Congress to act. 6 states, both blue and red, have adopted bans on flavored vapes, as have more than 200 small towns and big cities. The bans have won bipartisan support because parents don't want their children using e-cigarettes, and they know that keeping flavors off the market is essential to keeping their kids addiction-free. Tragically, if Congress doesn't step in to restore the FDA's ban on flavored e-cigarettes, more children will become addicted to nicotine, more will contract serious diseases, and more will die early and painful deaths. They deserve much better than that, and it's up to all of us to make sure that our elected representatives stand up for them and stop selling them out to the tobacco companies. Michael R. Bloomberg, the author of this article, is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the current parent company of Bloomberg News, and the founder of Bloomberg Philanthropies. NRG sells former Dunkirk power plant by Jonathan D. Epstein. 10 years after shutting its Dunkirk power plant, NRG Energy has sold the station and the land around it to a developer specializing in repurposing long-time industrial properties, a significant step in getting the property back to useful life. Houston-based NRG said it had completed the sale of the sprawling facility in Governor, a Texas-based company that works with corporations and utilities to prepare former power plants and other industrial properties for redevelopment. The firm manages deconstruction and demolition of utility facilities and provides consulting services to help clients navigate brownfield cleanup issues and liabilities. Financial terms were not disclosed. This is an important step for Dunkirk and builds on years of collaboration, said Matt Pistner, Senior Vice President of NRG and President of NRG Wholesale. We care deeply about this community and are proud of the role the facility played here. Jennifer, based in Chapel Hill, Texas, will be responsible for leading the next phase of site planning, preparation, and eventual redevelopment, working in conjunction with city officials in Dunkirk and Chautauqua County leaders, including the Chautauqua County Industrial Development Agency, CCIDA. I'm very pleased that all of the hard work the CCIDA, County, City of Dunkirk, and other stakeholders contributed to getting the NRG plant back into productive use has finally resulted in something very meaningful and positive, Executive of the County, P.J. Wendell, said. NRG operated its Dunkirk generating station from the 1950s until 2016, when the 600 megawatt coal-fueled power plant was retired. The company said it has worked with local and state leaders over the past 10 years to determine how to best return the site to productive use. A Buffalo consulting firm was even brought in 7 years ago to study potential reuse, but there has been no major movement since then. The Dunkirk site is one of two major former power plants in western New York that NRG has closed. The other one, the former Huntley plant in the town of Tonawanda, has also been closed since 2016 and is caught up in an eminent domain fight with the town. This transaction represents an important step forward for the Dunkirk community and the continued evolution of the site, the company said, declining further comment. The plant sits on 75 acres, but the property includes another 500 acres of landfill, where NRG used to dump coal ash, said Vince DeJoy, Director of Planning and Development for the City of Dunkirk. DeJoy said the plans for the property are still vague, and he and CCIDA CEO Mark Geese will be meeting with Governor Genover, Genober, officials Wednesday, after holding an introductory meeting 2 weeks ago with NRG. They've been working on the transfer of the property, but we have not met with them formally. DeJoy said Dunkirk knew NRG was working on a deal since late last summer, but the company couldn't divulge the identity of the buyer until now because of a non-disclosure agreement. But he said that NRG has previously done business with Genover to sell other commissioned sites. Genover has undertaken 6 previous projects in Louisiana, North Carolina, Indiana, and Texas. One of them, the former State Line plant at the northernmost tip of Indiana in the Chicago metropolitan area, is similar to the Dunkirk facility, DeJoy said. It was built in the early 1800s on 80 acres of reclaimed land along Lake Michigan. Once the largest power plant in the world, it was acquired by Dominion Power in 2005, but eventually shut down because of weak demand and high upgrade expenses. Genover bought it in 2012, demolished it, cleaned the site, and sold it to a local lakefront industrial company. The other 5 include the Entergy Willow Glen plant in St. Gabriel, Louisiana, a 2,200 megawatt gas and oil-fired plant that was built in 1960 on 700 acres. The plant was retired in 2016. The Edgecombe Genco power plant, a coal-fired cogeneration facility that was built and began operations in 1990. It was shut down in 2019. P.H. Robinson, an NRG natural gas plant in Texas that was shut down after it was damaged by Hurricane Ike. Genover bought it and 1,100 acres in 2011, separated it from the power grid, and demolished and remediated it over 18 months. Hiram Clark, a power plant built in the early 1940s by Houston Power and Light, It was shut down in 1980 and sat vacant for years before new owner Biofuels Power hired Jennifer to clean the site and demolish the facility. ROVA, which consisted of a pair of coal power plants in northeast North Carolina that were started up in 1994 but retired in 2017 and acquired by Jennifer. Work was completed in 15 months and the site was sold to Roseburg Forest. At Dunkirk, DeJoy said the developer will try to assess what's there before determining the next steps. They don't know what the extent of contamination is on the site, he said. But DeJoy said Dunkirk wants to see the facility repowered, particularly as a nuclear power plant. And he said he understands Jennifer would be open to looking at that. Governor Kathy Hochul has called for construction of new nuclear power generating capacity that would produce at least 1 gigawatt of additional energy, citing the impending electricity shortage that the state is facing. And the New York Power Authority issued a request for information last year for interested developers and municipalities to respond. 23 firms and 8 municipalities expressed interest, but Dunkirk was the only one in western New York. On Monday, Hochul and the NYPA issued 2 new solicitations to advance the effort, one seeking experienced nuclear developers and partners, and another seeking training providers based in the state to apply for $40 million in nuclear workforce development funding. Beyond nuclear, DeJoy said, we've done a lot of planning, and there are some different scenarios, but nothing definite. Some power plants locally and nationally have been reused for data centers, particularly for cryptocurrency mining or artificial intelligence computing, since they already have the infrastructure. DeJoy said that would still require having power at the site, but the city would not support a large data mining operation, although a hyperscale data center could be a good use. This site has been part of our community's identity for generations, and its transition opens the door to new opportunities for growth and investment, Mayor Kate Doaz said. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the East Aurora Advertiser. At 11 o'clock, we have the Niagara Gazette. And at noon, we have the Dunkirk Observer. Stay with us for these readings and more throughout the day. Radio Reading mails out a large print program schedule to our listeners every other month. If you have not received a Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service large print program schedule in the mail, please call us at 716-821-5555. We will make sure that you receive one every other month. A Braille version of the schedule is also available upon request. Our number again is 716-821-5555. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability